Hey everybody, Eric Renier here with Philippe J. Fournier for our new episode of The Numbers this week. I'm still getting into the swing of it, the weekly episodes and everything. I was tripping over my own words there. But Philippe, we're now very well ensconced into the post-election period. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm recovering. To be honest, I don't want to sound like a whiner here, but I was exhausted. And I'm glad that it's passed. As I said before, I think at some point I will miss being in the intensity of a campaign, but it needed to end, and I'm glad it did. And now it's kind of fun to you and I will have much to talk about, but we have no rush. There's no hurry, right, to talk about the stuff that we're going to talk about. So that's kind of fun. How are you, Eric? Have you rested last week a little bit?
I have, and I felt like actually, I know that you had a bit more of a rougher campaign. I felt like I had a good campaign.
Yeah. The end of the campaign was tough, but
yeah. But I felt like I had a good one. So now I'm really looking forward to this next little phase. Take it a little bit more slower, maybe dive a bit deeper into things. And one of the changes, I'll just say it right off the front, we're going to start putting out our episodes now in the early week. So today's Monday. We'll see. Probably in the future it'll be Tuesdays. But this will be what we're going to be looking for into the future. So if you're wondering why we're here at the beginning of the week, that's why we're changing our schedule. We think that early week will be propitious time for the numbers to chat. So we're going to start with some news.
Yep.
We had, the last time we chatted was on Wednesday, and there hadn't been any of these seats flipping. At the time, there was 169 seats for the Liberals. Then it dropped down to 168. Then it went back up to 169. And they're still validating some results as we speak. So we could see potentially some other changes because those validated results, we have seen some pretty big changes with the validation, sometimes to the point of 1 or 2 points. It hasn't really made a difference in a lot of seats, but it made a difference in 2 seats. Terrebonne in the Montreal suburbs went from Liberal to Bloc. So the Bloc ends up holding the seat that was really tight. Yep. And I think it's close enough for, was it a recount?
It's 44 votes. So I think it's 1.1% difference, right? So there will be a legal challenge there, but 44 votes, unless there's a big mistake, like you forgot a box or something, that should not flip. But the due process is okay, no problem there.
Yeah. So, and then when that dropped the Liberals down to 168, and then we heard news very shortly afterwards that they won in Milton East, Halton Hills South. That one flipped from the Conservatives to the Liberals, bumping the Liberals back up to 169. So a little bit of changes there. And I think for both of us, those were good changes because I think we both had the Bloc winning in Terrebonne and the Liberals winning in Milton East.
That's right.
So thank you to Elections Canada. If you can just make a few more corrections, we'd appreciate it. We think that our numbers were right. So just nice to see Elections Canada getting there. But anyway, so some shifts, we'll see if any of these more flip. And you know, there's been lots of focus about whether the Liberals get to 172. Doesn't seem like that's going to happen with the validation.
No, it's not.
But it doesn't really make a difference. If you're at 170, 171, or 172, 173, yeah, sure, one's a majority, one's a minority, but it's not going to make much of a difference in the House.
No. It won't. And I think I said that on the podcast last week, but 169 being 3 short, and you don't know who's going to be speaker. I mean, I've heard serious people say Elizabeth May could be speaker, though. So do you take away a seat from the opposition? This is just as good as a majority, except for committees, of course, but for like confidence votes and stuff, having 172 or 173, the onus comes on you. It's on the Liberals to make sure they keep everybody happy. So this is like a majority that could maybe not last 4 years. So short term, I think it should be pretty stable. We'll wait and see, but it should be pretty stable.
Yeah, I am curious how long this one will last, right? Traditionally, minority governments, the average is usually around 18 months or a year and a half, or 18 to 24 months. That's usually the window of when a minority government falls. This one, the last one that just ended, almost did the full 4 years. It was one of the longest, if not the longest, minority governments in history. So it was the exception. So we kind of got used to it. But when you think about the last 20 years, you had roughly 2 years between the 2004, 2006, 2 years, 2006, 2008, 3 years, 2008, 2011. And then Trudeau's first minority was only 2 years.
Yep.
So this one could, I mean, it doesn't mean that the government falls.
Yeah.
When you don't have the majority, there's a bit more of a leeway for the incumbent government to decide that they need a new mandate.
That's true. But considering where the Liberals were at only 3-4 months ago, I don't know, there's risk in there, right? Unless you really want to catch the opposition by surprise. But a cynical move like this would make voters even more cynical, and I don't see the benefit of the Liberals to do that. You saw Mr. Carney last week when he was asked about Pierre Poilievre and about the by-election that will be called in Alberta. He seemed, I mean, he did say no games, right? But he seemed pretty sincere in saying, no, we're going to get this done as fast as possible. Like there's no point in dragging this out. Like they dragged out La Salle-Mare Verdun and Langley City, Cloverdale. I mean, it became a game of having to wait, to make the opposition wait to get a seat. And we could say the same thing about Danielle Smith. I mean, that Edmonton-Strathcona seat has been vacant since, December 31st, I think the date was when Rachel Notley officially resigned. And I think that podcast we did the week after that, I said that by-election is going to be in late June. It looks like it will be. So, everything to not have Nancy in the house. It's fair game, but it's not necessary, right? And so we'll see. The CAQ did the same thing. So it's playing games with the opposition. Sometimes it's fun. So
we were discussing last week about what would happen with Pierre Poilievre. He didn't have his seat in Carleton. He lost that. We're recording this on Monday, and apparently, it's not all this isn't confirmed, but apparently there will be a vote within the Conservative caucus, maybe on Tuesday, to vote for the Reform Act to see if they can, one of them being one of the thresholds for having a vote against the leader. So it's possible that something could happen in the next couple of days. I'd be kind of surprised. I think Pierre Poilievre is probably going to not get removed from the leadership. But he is going to have a seat. Do you want to call it already? So he will be running in Battle River Crowfoot. So this is a riding in kind of southern Alberta. It actually kind of, the northern portion of the riding kind of touches Edmonton. The southern portion kind of touches Calgary. This is a huge riding. And it was pretty close last in the election, wasn't it?
So 82% for Damien Curricht, which is 70 points above the Liberals.
It was 71% point difference.
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to be okay.
The NDP finished third with 4%, PPC 1%, Greens less than 1%. So one of the safest seats in the country, regardless of party, right? Did the Liberals get 80% in any riding? I don't think so. I think they got. I saw a few 70s, but not 80s. 80s is nuts. What's interesting is, does that change the dynamic that the leader of the opposition and perhaps the prime minister in waiting will be in Alberta instead of being in suburban Ottawa? I'm not sure how much this changes. Will this become the permanent home of Pierre Poilievre? Like in the next general election, if he's still leader, is he going to be running in Battle River Crowfoot? That's what's interesting, but that's far down the line, right? So we don't know that.
We do get the indication from the statements that Damien Curricht is stepping down, quote, temporarily. So that suggests that the intention is that he would run again in the next election, which then brings up the far more interesting question of where would Pierre Poilievre run in the next election? Would he try to win Carleton again? Would he just go somewhere else? And that's actually really interesting. I don't know. I can imagine he might try to win again in Carleton. I mean, it was still pretty close. And, if the next election is not as favorable to the Liberals, then maybe it swings back to the Conservatives. But does he just try somewhere else entirely? Does he run for somewhere where he grew up in Alberta? I don't know. It'd be kind of interesting to know where he's going to run.
That sounds like a draft, my friend, for a special episode.
Hey.
Oh, there you go.
That's a good idea. We're also going to do at some point, I think for one of our Patreon episodes, we'll do an NDP leadership draft.
Absolutely. We will.
Yeah.
We'll have to talk about the NDP. I don't think we will much today. There's not much to say except, that it's not going well. But what happens to the NDP in the next 3 years is going to be fascinating. It could completely reshape the race. You said something last week, Eric, that kind of struck me, that this election with the Liberals at 44% and the Conservatives at 41%, it's an exception. You said that. It's like the outlier of elections. Well, we don't know that. I think I agree with you, right? Could this be a one-off, or could this be a new trend? I think the NDP will take some time to recover. They will. There's no leader, no safe seats anymore. Money will be an issue for the NDP, and so if the NDP is weak for a few cycles, we could be in for, this new era of two parties dominating the landscape. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the other aspects we don't discuss very much is that People's Party vote also went down by 4 points, right?
Completely
almost certainly,
collapsed.
almost all of it went to the Conservatives.
Yeah.
But you do have this very polarized race where all you have are the two big parties, and then the Bloc, which is a regional party, and then small parties. I mean, the amount of vote that the NDP got is similar to what the Greens got in like 2019, right? And they weren't considered a major party in that sense. So, and you mentioned money. I'm very curious to see the statements for the NDP because I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble. Their candidates did so poorly that they did not, in a lot of cases, get money back for the deposit. They also would not have gotten their high enough to get their election expenses reimbursed, which is something that the parties really rely on to get that money kind of back into the coffers. So I'm very curious. Did the NDP put itself into debt in order to run this campaign, and now they're not going to be able to pay that off for a while, which is another factor which makes this parliament seem a bit safer and a bit more likely to stick around for a little while.
You mentioned just a second ago, and I don't want to dive too much into this, but you mentioned the PPC tanking. You remember there was a by-election in Manitoba, in Portage-Lisgar, and Maxime Bernier himself ran in that by-election, and the reason he had done that is that in the general election in 2021, the PPC had over 20% of that riding. Portage-Lisgar, so Brendan Leslie won for the Conservatives with 69% of the vote. Liberals came second with 23%. The PPC, 2%. The PPC completely tanked. That party is done. It will remain on the map because Maxime Bernier is going to stick around, but it won't be a force. Like it won't be a threat to the Conservatives in the next few years.
We got some polling numbers that we're going to dive into just a little bit because we actually got some post-election surveys. One that was a pretty in-depth one from Léger. Now, I'm curious about how this was done. I assume that they did a normal poll and then weighted it according to the results. Because if you look, they have like voting intentions numbers. I mean, they call it the voter profile, but they match exactly what happened in the election. That suggests to me that they weighted it towards that. So we do get some indication of demographic voting. Now, I wouldn't want to put too much weight onto it because there would be that weighting factor that would be applied, like after the fact. But it suggests that the Liberals won the vote among women by 13 points, but they lost it among men by 8. Which tracks, makes sense.
Yeah.
But then when you look at it by age, that the Liberals won
age is strange, huh?
18 to 34 by 7. The Conservatives won 35 to 54 by 5. But then this is the big surprise, I guess. The 55 plus, the Liberals only won by 3.
That's not what the polls were saying prior to the election, right? Not even close. I mean, I'm not surprised. The young voters we saw, Pierre Poilievre had completely lost his advantage. But it was oscillating between a small conservative lead among young voters to a small liberal lead. But we had the 55 and over, and in some cases the 65 and overs, like double-digit leads for the Liberals. So this is a surprise. I will ask some questions because this was released this weekend. I didn't have time to dig in too much into it. I will ask some questions how this was done. But I also noticed that it was breakdown by language. Did you see that? English-speaking Canadians, 45 Liberal, 45 Conservatives.
Sure, that makes sense.
Very interesting that it was split down the middle. Among French-speaking Canadians, 35% for the Liberals, 31% for the Bloc. So I guess among francophones in Canada, how many live in Quebec? So it's like 85%. Is that maybe more? I think that's it, right?
Well,
I count 10 million French Canadians and 8.5 live in Quebec or something. So
okay.
that's 85%.
Well, I mean, there'd be less than that in Quebec, right? Because the population of Quebec isn't 10 million.
It's the 9 and something, yeah.
Is it now? Okay. Yeah, no,
it's
that's
over
probably
9 million.
right. I mean, like you got the ones, the Acadians in New Brunswick, and then population of francophones in like Ontario is like 500,000 or so.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. Okay.
yeah, so it probably means then that the Liberals in the Bloc might have nearly tied
Yeah.
among
in
francophones.
Quebec.
Because you probably have to knock down the Liberals a little bit because a lot of their francophone vote would have been from outside. Though the Conservatives actually did surprisingly well. One of the ridings I was tracking on election night was Madawaska Restigouche,
Yeah.
which is like a
It was
hugely
blue at some
safe
point.
riding. And at one point
Yeah.
it was blue, and it stuck blue for a while.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, some interesting numbers among education showed a tie between people who just finished high school. You have a 6-point lead among college graduates and a 15-point lead for the Liberals among university graduates. And when you look at the map, that really kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You got downtown cores voting Liberal, smaller urban centers also voting Liberal. You know, a place like Peterborough, right?
Yeah.
Where there's a university. So yeah, these demographic numbers are interesting to see. I would like to see more, though.
Yes.
Because some of them are a little bit surprising. So either something happened in the election that we didn't really expect, or it's a bit of a, you know, it's a bit of a more difficult exercise to do an exit poll and have it be accurate.
Interesting that the next question was, when did you make up your mind? And you and I talked about this during the campaign, how, I mean, there were some regional fluctuations, some minor movement we saw in Ontario and in Quebec and in BC, but overall the lines were pretty much flat the whole election. More than half of voters said they made up their minds before the election started, which I found fascinating. There was so much movement before the writ dropped that when the writ dropped, a lot of voters like, yeah, okay, I'm done. I know who I'm voting for. Conservative base mostly held up. And we have to talk about this because I've seen a lot of chatter saying Pierre Poilievre didn't blow anything. He had 41.3% of the vote. That's what the poll said in January. Well, not quite. He was at 45, 46, 47. But that's not that huge a drop. It's just that all the anti-conservative vote basically coalesced behind one brand, which is usually not how that happens, and not at least in our lifetimes, right? So, interesting.
Leger found that 68% of conservative voters made up their mind before the campaign started, and then another 11% in the first 2 weeks. So they had locked in pretty much 80% of what was their vote before really the halfway point of the campaign. For the Liberals, it was only 45% before the campaign started, and then 28% in the first 2 weeks. So they had to it took a little bit more time to lock in their voters. But interestingly, neither of them have very high the day of the election or over the last weekend of the campaign. So their vote really wasn't a last minute vote, and it wasn't in one favor or the other, right? So that was kind of an interesting result. I don't want to make too much of this because it is a very small sample, but there was a question of, were you happy with your vote? Do you regret the way you voted? 92% of Canadians said they were happy with their vote. Only 2% said they regretted the way they voted. Among NDP, 6% said they regretted the way they voted, which was higher than the Liberals and the Conservatives. Might just be a sample thing, but I wonder if you have some voters there who thought maybe the NDP had a shot in some ridings and didn't in the end. Maybe wondering if they should have voted for a different party.
I mean, that narrative exists.
Yeah.
Out there for sure. I'm just not sure this poll proves it or disproves it.
I will accept that.
That's the thing. But yeah, I mean, considering, I mean, the NDP barely managed to win Vancouver Kingsway. Even Winnipeg Centre, which we talked about during the campaign, was really close. Lia Gazan survived this, but that was close. And of course, I mean, we talked rarely about the territories, but Nunavut was also really close, right? I think it was 50 votes or something. So maybe there are some NDPers that are having second thoughts, but you know what? Okay, and we'll see in 3.5 years. The next election scheduled October 15th, 2029.
Okay.
I looked it up. So
Mark
third
it on the
Monday of
calendars.
October.
That's an early October election. Well, compared to sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's 1 week after Labor Day. Not Labor Day, Thanksgiving, Canadian Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Eric, do we get there? Do we get to October 2029?
No.
You don't? You say no?
No. I think it's unusual for minority governments to last that long. I think at some point, either Carney or, assuming he's still there, which I assume he will be, but he wants a different mandate. He doesn't want to deal with stuff. He just wants to take advantage. Or, NDP has a new leader who's more bullish and wants to go to a campaign and the Bloc doesn't care and whatever. I don't know. There could be lots of factors. So I'm going to guess that it does not last to 2029.
October 2029, we are 8 months into Trump's third mandate, right? So, no, just kidding. Let's move on.
Okay. One other number we thought was interesting came from an Abacus poll that hasn't been released as the time we're talking, but it was tweeted by David Coletto.
Yeah.
And the question was, if Justin Trudeau had been the Liberal leader in this campaign, how would you have voted? 46 Conservative, 28 Liberal, 12 NDP, 8 Bloc.
Wow.
So, yeah, Trump was a big factor, but looks like Carney and Trudeau were big factors too.
Well, that's the thing is, I know the Conservatives did their best to link Trudeau and Carney, and as they should. It was a smart thing to do. Trudeau was so unpopular at the end. But Mark Carney really succeeded in his entry in politics. The fact that day one or day two, he canceled the carbon tax, and during the campaign, he had a very different style, much less in your face. And I don't want to say provocative, but you know what I mean, than Justin Trudeau, feisty, right? He struck the right note for most of the campaign. So these numbers, I mean, how many seats is that? I mean, 46% for the Conservatives, we saw that in December and January, but the Liberals were not at 28. Yeah. They were around 20, right? So that's a massive majority for the Conservatives. The NDP is still at 12, though. That's interesting. That's bad for the NDP.
And it's worth noting that Abacus had already the NDP a little bit higher, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So compared to the last Abacus poll, this is only a 2-point jump for the NDP.
Yep.
So that suggests to me that the NDP has some much bigger structural problems.
Oh, yeah.
Rather than just Carney and Poilievre and all this kind of thing. So it's an interesting finding. We'll see. We're not going to follow the bouncing ball of the polls that much over the next little while, but once in a while, when there are some interesting numbers, we're gonna dive into them.
Well, I think we're going to get some provincial numbers. I mean, we always do before the summer break, before mid-June, right? And I'm on good authority that we'll have some Quebec numbers coming soon, which should be interesting. So anyway, yeah.
I think we're going to do a quiz.
It's been a while, huh?
Yeah,
okay,
back to the quiz.
Return of the quiz. For those who just joined us during the campaign and we haven't seen a quiz, I don't do it every week, but I try to, have a little fun with Eric. He's the historian and he has a memory of an elephant, which is that, do we say that in English?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, sure. It's a good memory, basically. So Eric, on election night, was at the map of CPAC. And he did a really good job at it too. And so I know that you fiddled around with that map and you know very well your map. So I figured I would have a quiz on the 2025 election to see if you remember well your map. Are you ready, my friend?
Yes, I am ready.
Here's the quiz. I will give you 10 writings. You have to tell me which party finished second in that writing. Okay. If you get the right party that finished second, you get a point. Then I will ask you, what did that second place party get as a share of the vote? I will give you a range. We round down or round up the percentage that the person got, and I give you a plus or minus 4 range. For instance, if the candidate had 30.3%, I round to 30, and the acceptable range goes from 26 to 34. If you get that right, you get a point. So there are 20 points available to you, my friend. Gold is 14. Silver is 12, bronze is 10, and below 10 is shame, as you know. Okay, we're going to go from west to east. I will go on Vancouver Island and ask you, Eric, who finished second in Nanaimo Ladysmith? It was won by the Conservative candidate, Tamara Cronis, who finished second.
I remember that it was the Liberals who finished second, because if I'm not mistaken, the NDP finished third, and Paul Manley, the Greens, finished fourth. So the Liberals finished second, and Nanaimo Ladysmith.
And you get the point. That is true. Michelle Corfield for the Liberals finished second. Now, vote share. I give you a plus or minus 4 percentage point bracket. What did Michelle Corfield of the Liberals get in Nanaimo Ladysmith?
I'm pretty sure the Conservatives did pretty okay, like high 30s in that riding, and the margin wasn't super close. So I think the Liberals probably had 26.
The Liberals had 27.9.
Oh,
so you're well within range. You get 2 points. And this is too easy. Good job, man. All right. Number 2. Vernon Lake Country, Monashee in the interior of British Columbia. It was won by Conservative MP Scott Anderson. Eric, who finished second?
There again, it was the Liberals, I think. They did quite well in the BC interior, pretty surprisingly. And I think that they finished second in Vernon Lake Country, Monashee.
And yes, they did. Anna Warwick Sears of the Liberals finished second. So you get the point. Now, what share of the vote did Miss Warwick get?
This one, I'm more just guessing. I think they did pretty well, but not close enough that it was really that much of a toss-up. So, and the Conservatives, I think, probably got in the high 40s. So I'm going to say it was 30%.
Miss Anna Warwick Sears had 42.8% of the vote. I know, right? The Liberals really did well in the interior. I agree with you. So
That's
you don't
really
get
surprising.
a point here.
Wow.
It's very surprising, but good for them. Again, the NDP completely tanked. The NDP had 5% in that.
Wow.
So after 2, you have 3 points. Okay. I'm going to Alberta, Eric. Ponoka Didsbury. Won by the Conservative MP Blaine Sculkins. Eric, why are you laughing? Eric, who finished second in Ponoka Didsbury?
This is a trick question. There was no Liberal candidate. So it was the NDP who finished second. It was, I think, the only place they did in like rural Alberta. So the NDP finished second in Ponoka Didsbury.
Logan Hooley finished second for the NDP. Indeed, there was no Liberal in that riding. Okay, now, what share of the vote did Mr. Hooley of the NDP get in Ponoka Didsbury?
Still didn't do very well. I think it was like, I'm going to say 11%.
It was 10.8%. So, well within range. Good job, Eric. What is the UPC? The United something?
United Party.
Oh, finished third with 3%. Okay.
You know what? I bet you anything. A big chunk of those voters thought they were voting for the UCP.
We're not judging. Sometimes it can be confusing. So after 3, you have 5 points. You're on the way to gold, man. Okay. We are going into Manitoba.
Okay.
Winnipeg South Centre, which was won by Liberal MP Ben Carr, who finished second in Winnipeg South Centre.
That was the Conservatives. That was a riding that, once upon a time, maybe a few months ago, the Conservatives could have won, but not this campaign. So Conservatives second.
Royden Brousseau of the Conservatives finished second in Winnipeg South Centre. You get the point. Now, the vote share.
I'm pretty sure Carr did really well. So it wouldn't leave much for the other parties. So if I say the NDP and other parties probably got 15 altogether, and if you got 25.
Royden Brousseau of the Conservatives had 27.7% of the vote, so you are within range. Oh my God! Okay, 7 of 8 points. Oh, you're just, this is too easy. You're really good, man. Okay, very well. Number 5, we are going into Ontario, a riding that I think we had a surprise there. We did not expect. Sorry, my page just froze. I'm gonna reload. We're going into London Fanshawe. Formerly an NDP seat, no longer an NDP seat in London Fanshawe. It was won by the Conservatives, Kurt Homan, who finished second.
I think the NDP finished third in that riding. So I think it's the Liberals. I'm going to say it was the Liberals finished second in London Fanshawe.
Lindsay Matheson of the NDP did finich third. The Liberals finished second.
Third. Okay.
Got
Also,
you there,
I think
huh?
I might have called her Irene Matheson, which I think was her mother in a previous episode. So my apologies.
Apologies. Okay, so you're right. The Liberals did finish second in London Fanshawe, which says a lot about the NDP, to be honest.
The
What
NDP
about
still
the
did
vote share?
okay. I think they had like 28, 29% or something like that. And the Liberals didn't, the Conservatives didn't win it by a huge margin. So I think the Liberals would have gotten around 32.
Najam Nakvi of the Liberals had 30.5% of the vote. So you are once again within range. You have 9 of 10 points after 5. Wow, okay, you're almost out of shame. Here's a fun one.
Only in this quiz.
One that we discussed for other reasons during the campaign. Still in Ontario. Parry Sound Muskoka. Scott Aitchison won this for the Conservatives. Parry Sound Muskoka, Eric, who finished second.
Muskoka. Okay, there was no Green candidate there.
There was no Green candidate. Can you imagine? Oh my God. Yeah, I know.
The Liberals. I don't think the NDP would have finished second, so the Liberals would have finished second. But I don't think it was that. Well, they might have.
One thing at a time. Yes, it was the Liberals.
Okay.
You get the point. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Now, vote share.
I think it was not. I don't think it was super, super close, but I think that the Liberals still did pretty well. I don't know, 40.
Georgie Sabag of the Liberals had 42.6%. So you are once again within
That's
range.
still remarkable that they're getting 40 plus in some
know,
of these
right?
ridings. It's
Yeah.
just insane.
The NDP had 3.6%.
Wow.
There was no Green candidate, and the NDP still only below 4% in that riding. So what a strange election. You have 11 points. You have bronze locked up. 11 points out of 12. Number 7, we are going into Quebec. A riding that we did not pay too much attention to because it was a pretty safe riding. We're going into Saint-Maurice Champlain in La Mauricie, won of course by François-Philippe Champagne of the Liberals. Who finished second?
Oh, this is good. Oh, was it the Bloc or was it the Conservatives? I think it was probably the Bloc. I'm going to say the Bloc finished second.
The Bloc had... No, I'm not going to say that. The Bloc finished third in that riding.
I knew it.
Thierry Bilodeau. It was the Conservatives who finished second. Pierre-Augustin Allard. Vote share.
Conservatives
So you
had a
don't get
lot
the
of
point here.
surprising second finishes in Quebec. I was going through some of them. So I don't still think they did that well, though. So I'm going to say it was probably 25.
Pierre-Augustin Allard of the Conservatives had 24.6% of the vote. How do you get that? Wow, okay. So you have 1 point there. You're at 12. What did I say? That's silver.
14 was gold, yeah.
Okay.
I'm going for
So
gold.
we have 3 left. Oh, you're in a good position to get gold here. Okay. We're going into the island of Montreal. Something that we didn't look too much in the island of Montreal. They were not close seats, right? Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Just next door to me. I don't live in the plateau, but I live next door. Stephen Guilbeault for the Liberals won this. Who finished second?
I think I remember looking at this one. So it was Nima Mashouf of the NDP. She finished second.
Nima Mashouf did finish second ahead of the Bloc Québécois in that riding. It's really not a Bloc seat anymore, huh? Those days are so gone.
She had this absolute seat.
Yep.
What was the vote share? I think it was somewhere around 19%.
18.8%. I'm giving you too much of a range. It should have been a 1 point range, right? So you get 2 points. You are at 14. You got gold.
There you go.
All right. Should we
Just run up the numbers. Let's go.
Try to have super gold now, okay? We're going into northern Quebec. No, well, northern Quebec, not that north, but Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord was won by Richard Martel. And I know at CPAC, if you followed that writing early on, we did it at Bell Media, at Nouveau, because Richard Martel was third in the early voting, and then he finally ended up winning. Who finished second in Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord?
I think, okay, well, it was supposed to be a Bloc Conservative fight. But did the Bloc actually not finish second there? My gut says it was the Liberals, but I'm going to say it was the Bloc.
You say it's the Bloc?
Yeah.
And you are correct.
Oof.
It is the Bloc. But it was really close. Vote share. Impress me with your vote share.
Yeah, this one's going to be... I don't think the Conservatives did super well in this one either. But like this, if you have three parties doing okay, I don't know, 28?
31.2. Okay, so you are within range.
Right.
So you get 16 points, man. So that one was interesting, huh? Richard Martel, 34%.
Wow.
Marc Saint-Hilaire of the Bloc, 31.2. And Stéphane Proulx of the Liberals, 31.1.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's three parties basically taking 97% of the vote, almost evenly. So, okay, very well. Got one last one for you, so you can just brag and have bragging rights here because you're doing super well. I don't think it's the hardest either. Halifax. We're going into Atlantic Canada. Halifax. The Liberals, Shannon Miedema, won this. Who finished second?
I don't think it was the NDP. It was supposed to be a Liberal NDP fight, and I don't think it was. I think it was the Conservatives who finished second.
And it absolutely was the Conservatives.
Wow.
The NDP, when we say the NDP tanked, we had the NDP maybe winning the by-election that never happened in Halifax for the longest time, right? The NDP finished third in Halifax. So, all right, want to run up to have... But you have 16 now, so you could have 18 points on this if you get the right vote share. That would be amazing.
I think the Liberals did really well, probably like 60%. I remember seeing the NDP at 18 or 17, so that wouldn't leave that much left for the Conservatives. So if I put it at 20 for the Conservatives.
Marc Boudreau of the Conservatives had 19.1%. So you're just crushing that quiz. Or my quiz was too easy, but I say you crushed it. All right. Well, congratulations, Eric. Almost a perfect mark here across the board. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. All right. Well, I guess that's we used to do number of the week.
I have a number of the week. I have
okay.
one.
We'll go back to doing the number of the week. Okay. What do you got for number of the week?
23. The Bloc won 23 seats. My final projections for the Bloc was 23 seats. So thank you, Terrebonne. Thank you, Terrebonne. You make sure my prediction was dead on. So that's my number of the week.
Okay. Mine will be less hopeful. You had the polling from Léger. One of the questions was, how much do you trust that the 2025 Canadian election results are accurate? 65% said they trust. 29% said they don't trust. And most concerning was that among one party in particular, don't trust was above trust. It was 44% trust among Conservative voters, 52% don't trust among Conservative voters. So that's unfortunate. Though, to his credit, we heard nothing of that sort from Pierre Poilievre on his concession speech on election night, and I think that is a good thing. But it's unfortunate that we see these kinds of numbers in the results. And you know what? It doesn't really help that we have some ridings flipping post-election.
Well, the thing is, this happens, though.
Yes, I know. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious about it, but it doesn't help if you already feel that these things are, Anyway, it feels like there must be something they could do a bit better. I don't know.
If it was rigged, Terrebonne would not go to the Bloc. But I know what you mean, though. And thing is, basically the same crowd pushing "Don't trust the polls," whereas the polls were excellent. Many feel that they were wronged, which is interesting because in the same poll, Léger asked, when should the next election be? And one of the answer is as soon as possible, 19%. And when you're like really as soon as possible? And you look, it's mostly all conservatives. They want to have a rematch. So yeah. So Pierre Poilievre was extremely gracious in his speech. We should state, and as you said, he did not go into this stuff. He could have, right? He could have just sowed doubt. So I hope, people who think the election was crooked, I hope they get quelled a little bit, because it wasn't. So
yeah, and anyway, so we'll see what happens in the next little while. Going to be some interesting times. Got an NDP leadership race. Yep. We'll have a really hotly contested by-election in Battle River Crowfoot.
Yep.
I'm very curious to see what the turnout will be, just to see what it's going to be. A couple of weeks after the probably be about a month and a half after the federal. We'll see how many people in that riding are going to go out to vote again. But anyway,
which party will have a candidate too, right?
Yeah, I know. Well, would you even bother? But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode of The Numbers. Recall that if you want to join us at the Patreon, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. You get access to the Discord. You get access as well to ad-free audio versions of this podcast. So if you don't like that, you can join the Patreon. And we're going to have some bonus episodes in the future. We'll have one up probably in the next couple of weeks. Like I said, maybe do that NDP leadership draft. Maybe want to see who the interim is first, but we'll get there. But anyway, Philippe, it already feels like maybe the summer is starting, so it's going to be fun. We can let our hair down, metaphorically speaking, of course, in my case, and then we'll have lots to chat about. So looking forward to it, Philippe.
Absolutely. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. Talk to you soon. Long live the numbers.